Hello and welcome to episode 418 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now on today's episode, I'm joined by Eric Bass, the bassist and producer from the incredible band Shinedown. But on today's episode, we get to focus all about his brand new solo record. It's called I Had a Name. It's out literally now. It came out only a few days ago. It's awesome. You should go and listen. You should go and share it. But before you do, let's listen to me and Eric talk all about it. Not only on today's chat do we talk all about the making of this album, we talk about Shinedown, the band's history, his influences, and what's coming up for Eric in the near future. It's a great interview and will be coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. I like to use the intro for every episode of Mark and Me just to quickly touch base and talk about my last episode. It was a huge episode and I was joined by Grant Nicholas from Feeder. Thanks so much to everyone that took the time to listen. Thanks so much to Feeder and Grant for sharing it on all the socials. It did great numbers. It was so good to see so many people sharing it, and I appreciate all the love and support that came from that episode. But today, it's all about Shinedown, it's all about Eric and his solo record. So what I want to do now is to get straight to the interview. So here's me and Eric talking all things music. So Eric, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So what I do, Eric, with all guests that come on, and it doesn't matter what walk of life you've been on, I always like to take it right back to the very start.
Okay.
So I'm really interested when you were a kid, taking it right back down kind of memory lane today. What was that first album that maybe you bought with your pocket money, or that you were given from a family friend or someone that introduced you to that first album that you can still remember?
The first album I ever bought with my own money, this is not going to be sexy. It was the Fat Boys, actually. It was a rap album. At the time I was, look, I'm kind of old. So at the time breakdancing, it was like a thing. Like it had just kind of come out, and all my friends were in the neighborhood were all breakdancers. And so that music was always present around me when I was young. And I had just a cassette recorder, like just had one speaker on the bottom, and that's what I listened to my music on. I went and bought that tape, the cassette tape of that, and I know that's not super sexy, but that didn't really influence me musically at all. It was just kind of culturally, what was going on at the time. But the first records that I remember having, the first record I ever bought with my own money that like stuck. I bought two cassette, and they were cassette tapes. So we had vinyl around the house. We had 8 tracks around the house. But for me, the access to cassette, I had a cassette player of my own, so that's what I would listen to music on. Was Queen's Greatest Hits and the Aerosmith's Greatest Hits, the red cover, Aerosmith's Greatest Hits. This is before Permanent Vacation.
Yeah.
So those two things, man, and I just listen to those things nonstop. And I don't know why I picked those two things. I just went to the record store and like that's what I came out with. I don't remember why those were the two things.
I mean,
It might have been
they're pretty incredible foundations, aren't they, really? Like two of the biggest bands ever, and
yeah.
All the hits in one place.
Yeah, but again, it's just odd to me. Like I don't remember my thought process. It might have just been the way the cover looked or something. On Queen, they had the four faces, right?
Yeah, it's iconic with that
and,
black cover, yeah.
Yeah, and Aerosmith was just this red. I think they had two greatest hits at the time. It was a red cover and a blue cover or something, this was the one with the red cover. Maybe it was just striking, but I came home with those two things, and I listened. To this day, it's probably that was the foundation for me. Just loving albums, and to this day, I don't stream music. I buy music. So
Yeah.
I want to buy a record and I want to immerse myself in the record. And if I like it, I'll continue to immerse myself in it. If I don't, I'll put it down for a minute and come back to it. And it's interesting how music can be situational like that too. Like if something doesn't ring with you immediately, maybe you put it down for a few weeks or maybe a couple of years, and you come back to it and it's like, why didn't I get this the first time? So
I sound like a granddad, but I really miss the concept of a really good album. And I think
Mhm.
what's really nice now is that there's been this resurgence with everybody falling back in love with vinyl. So you can't get up and just skip a track. You need to listen to an
Yeah.
album in its entirety. And I'm really loving the fact of sticking a record on and maybe discovering those tracks that you wouldn't have listened to because you skipped them because it wasn't the single or you didn't really give it the time of day. And now those songs are really starting to grow on you
Yeah.
and really kind of have an effect.
Well, and also back to me sounding like you talk about you sounding old. Back to me sounding old. Cassette tapes and 8-track, which is another way that I listened to music when I was a kid because my mother had just tons of 8-track tapes, and so I would put those in. You couldn't skip through those really. You had an 8-track, you just had to listen to whatever. You had four sides, and whatever was the record was broken down to, and I don't remember what the track count would be on each side. I wasn't cognizant enough at the time of any of that, but you know you could learn that if you got to the middle of this song uh, on track one, if you skipped over to track four right then, the song you wanted to hear would be starting. You couldn't rewind them. You had to just listen through, and you couldn't place the music. You had to sit there and listen to the whole thing. Same thing with cassette in a way. It's like if I wanted to get to the last track on the record, I had to turn the tape over, fast forward all the way to the end, to listen to it. So it wasn't just this instant gratification. It caused you to just have to listen to the whole thing, even more so than vinyl. So
It's good. It's refreshing to hear, and there's a lot of people that I listen to, and especially with the younger generation, listening to the episodes or listen to us now and be like, "What are these two on about? What's a
yeah,
cassette? What's an eight
yeah. I
track?" You
mean,
know?
but that's okay, man. I think that the good thing about vinyl, back to that, is that I think that a younger generation is starting to realize the value of the of having something tangible associated with
Yeah,
music.
I
Where it's
agree.
like you can look at it and feel it. It is a whole other experience. I mean, when you have and especially reading liner notes, like just stuff like that. I said something to someone recently, a younger person, and I said something about liner notes, and what are liner notes? Like, oh, well, that's where you find out who worked on the record, and who did everything. Nobody really does that anymore.
But I remember, like, I'd stay up and have my Walkman back in the day and listening to my cassettes, and I'd have Nirvana, Nevermind, and Appetite
Mm,
for Destruction by Guns N' Roses,
yeah.
and all those early albums like Silverchair. And I'd
Yep.
look and read the lyrics alongside listening to the music and then seeing back, studio photos, and it felt like a whole package, not just a stream that would be listened to
Yeah.
and then disposable. So it really felt like a journey I'd be taken on, and I miss those days.
Well, and it also it could create a culture around a band. I mean, think about Appetite for Destruction. If you remember the album artwork for that, if
It
you
was
opened it up,
banned,
there were all
wasn't
these
it? Yeah.
cartoon drawings of like pretty seedy stuff at the time. It still is actually. But and I mean, it was kind of frightening for me. I forget that was what 88, 89, something like that.
Yeah.
I was probably that's the same time I think I discovered Appetite at the same time I discovered And Justice for All. I think it was
Oh,
kind of
wow.
in that same area, that same time period. But it kind of freaked me out. I mean, I was probably seventh or eighth grade, seventh grade maybe, and it was like, what is this, But there was something edgy about it, something cool about it. If I hadn't had that visual to go with it, maybe it would have. I mean, the music sounded dangerous, but the artwork made it more dangerous.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that the kids are getting to discover now. I don't know, but
I
I
mean,
hope so.
you've got some incredible foundations there, especially with Queen and stuff like that to build upon. And I wondered then when it led to a live show. So I think it was my school day, so maybe 12 or 13,
Mm,
and my first gig was Green Day on their Dookie tour, which is I'm so grateful for because
yeah,
they were a free piece and there was no extra session musicians or live, it was just the three of them. And I
yeah,
couldn't believe that the three of them on stage were making that much noise. I was just blown
yeah.
away. And I came home and I was obsessed and wanted a guitar and would try and learn songs like When I Come Around. And I just remember that band still today, that whole show. And I wondered if you were lucky and had a great first gig, or is it one that you don't tell people about, or
Man, I'm going to be the lamest guest you've ever had, probably. Uh, so Fat Boys was my first record and my first show. And so I had my best friend in high school. His father was a police officer and he'd work security at shows. And so when we got to the age where we started to get into music, uh, he could get us into the show. He just opened the door and let us in.
That's a good friend
And
to have.
yeah, the first gig though was the band Nelson, and I don't know if you remember Nelson or not. It was Ricky Nelson's sons
Oh,
who were in a band
okay.
called Nelson. Blonde hair, long blonde haired dudes, man. And look, look. I'm a child of hair music, really. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of when I hit my stride. Was like right when "Talk Dirty to Me" by Poison hit the radio,
Yeah, that's
and
a
it was like,
huge.
uh,
Yeah.
but Nelson and a band called Enough's Enough was opening. The guy and I saw, and Nelson was huge at the time. I mean, they were huge in the States anyway. They were big. Um, but my second gig that I went to was Skid Row with Pantera
Oh
opening.
my
So
God.
that would have been a better, and it was in between. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I know that it was before Slave to the Grind. So it was that Skid Row, the first Skid Row record. They were touring on that, and Pantera was opening, and I believe Pantera was. I don't know if they had recorded Vulgar or Just Play a Power yet. They might have, but I'll
Oh
tell you what,
wow.
man, like not knowing who Pantera was and I think I was 15 at that show, and seeing this band come out, and like, I'd never heard anything like that. Honestly, like I mean, again, I talk about Injustice for All and all this, and I'd heard that, but like in a live setting, Pantera is different than Metallica, man. Pantera is like it was just like,
I
I
think it's
mean,
like a huge force. I saw them at Ozfest
yeah,
when I was about the same age as you, about 15, and it was
yeah,
them and Slayer and Pantera. The moment they came on, they started with Cowboys from Hell, so it was that jugga
mm,
jugga 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 jugga, and
yeah,
everyone was just running towards the stage. And I was like a kid, I was just absolutely petrified because all these skinheads and bikers were there, and I just remember this wall of sound. And the moment Phil Anselmo came on, it was like he had the crowd in his whole hand from the moment
yeah.
he literally stepped on stage.
Yeah, man, and not that I didn't enjoy Skid Row, I did enjoy Skid Row because that's who I was there to see. But Pantera just really stuck out in my, that stuck with me, and I went and researched, and again, I can't remember if I bought Cowboys or if I bought Vulgar, and I don't remember which one was out at the time, but
Yeah.
um, I do know, and coming up, Pantera, one of my friends and I, when I was a little older, like 18, 19, we watched the Pantera had the Vulgar video. It was basically a behind the scenes of like them touring and
It's like a
making
montage,
Vulgar
isn't it? Of like studio footage
display
and
of
live
power. Yeah.
footage. Yeah.
Yeah, like and Life and Times kind of thing, and it was about an hour and a half long, maybe 2 hours of like VHS footage that they had recorded themselves on tour and in the studio, and some of that Skid Row tour was on that. So I'm not sure if again they were probably making Vulgar Display of Power at the time or something, but man, what an experience that was, and that was probably my first formative gig for sure was that one.
Did you remember at what point it was when you were thinking to yourself, I want to pick up an instrument myself. I want to get into the kind of songwriting. And did you do the whole college band and the Battle of the Bands thing, or was it a bit later?
No, we did. I mean, I kind of did all of those things, but it was not really a straight path. And I I grew up in a musical family. My grandfather was a professional musician. My mom was a professional musician at one point. By the time that I came along, neither one of them were professional musicians anymore. But um, my father was a naval commander, so I had this like push and pull of my mom being this free spirit musician, my dad being very strict and didn't want too much rock and roll in the house and this kind of thing. Um, interesting enough, my mom had been in a serious relationship with a musician in a band called the McCoys. They had that song "Hang On Sloopy." Remember that old
I do
song?
remember that
Yeah,
tune,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's a guy named David Wood. She was in a relationship with him, and he got into drugs real bad, and so she moved back here to Charleston, South Carolina, where I live, and met my dad like 2 weeks later. And she was playing a gig at the officers club at the naval base, and my dad walked in, and that was kind of it, right?
That's a good
But my
story.
mom was like founded in this in rock and roll, and my grandfather played in big bands with the Dorseys, like Tommy Dorsey and Benny Goodman and people like that in California, um, in the late 40s and early 50s. Um, and then he moved here and had a family, and so but anyway, I kind of grew up in a musical environment. But I was kind of made to play trombone. I was made to play piano, and I didn't really like those things. I couldn't stand being made to do something. But then when I discovered guitar, um, there was this Harmony, a company called Harmony made this tenor guitar that has just the top, the highest four strings on a guitar. So it's just a four-string guitar.
Yeah.
And my mom had one laying around the house, and I picked it up, and that's the first thing I ever did. I would just pick out melodies on that, and then I remember I wanted an electric guitar. My dad didn't really want me to have one. My mom got it for me anyway. And then it was over, man. I just locked myself in my room, and this is probably 13 years old. Um, and I pretty quickly started making recordings. Like I would say within the first 6 months, I started making recordings. And I thought that at the time, I thought I had invented the multi-track recorder. I knew nothing about recording, but I thought that I figured out that if I had three sisters, and they all had these in the 80s, we all had these big stereos, big
I
stereo
remember
systems.
them, yeah.
And they were cheap too, but they were huge. And each one of my sisters, my three sisters had one of those, and I had one of those. And so I stole their stereo systems and I put them in my room, and I figured out that I could record my guitar onto a cassette tape into this first stereo, and then I could play that back and come out of that into the next stereo and record another guitar into that one. So I was like basically like making track recordings using these home stereos. And I mean, it's just direct in with an acoustic guitar. It sounded awful, but it was the
The
I didn't
concept,
know
isn't
that
it? Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought bands walked into a studio and just all played together, and that was that. And I didn't really know, and some of them do, but I didn't know that there was this thing called multi-track recording. My mom kind of saw what I was doing, and she goes, "Oh, they make these, they make these multi-track recorders that you can."
We
So
can
I
make
think
this a lot easier for you, son. Yeah.
one Christmas she got me my mom and dad both, they got me a Yamaha MT 100 multi-track 4-track recorder, and I made guitar recordings. Like I started getting into Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and Yngwie Malmsteen and shredders and stuff, and I made my own kind of guitar instrumental recordings with a little drum machine, um, and then man, and then I hit high school at just the right time for music. Everything seemed to be just the right time, man. I mean, again, I was just discovering music when all these great, like Rat and Motley Crue and Van Halen and Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and I'm discovering music with these bands, as well as a lot of top 40 stuff, man. A lot of stuff that whatever was on the radio at the time. Like we had a couple of really good top 40 stations here, pop music stations here, and I'd listen to, whatever was on that too. Whitney Houston or whatever, whatever was hot at the time. Michael Jackson, Thriller, was a big deal. When I was a kid, I remember watching that video the day it debuted on MTV. Um, and but then I hit high school right when Nevermind and Soundgarden came out, and
The
and
Seattle
grunge hit.
scene, yeah.
Grunge hit when I was in high school. And so then the great thing that what grunge did for a kid like me was it because again I was into all of these shredders and this stuff, but I wasn't very good. I wasn't good enough to like. I was self-taught, and I didn't have the dexterity to really shred and really like do the thing. So, um, but here come these grunge bands, and it's like, oh, these dudes are just playing music. Like it didn't have to be this super technical thing, and it made music creation for me. It made it more tangible. It made it like, oh, I can do. I am not that, but maybe I can do that. And so during high school, my friends and I formed a band, a garage band, and we played all sorts of stuff. I mean, we played everything from Rush to Van Halen to Nirvana to whatever. But it we again those and not that and the interesting thing is it's not that uh and you and I both know this, and I think a lot of people know this, that era, like grunge and Nirvana and Soundgarden, none of that stuff is less than. But for a
No.
kid who's been like listening to Steve Vai play 2,000 notes a second, and trying to figure this
Yeah.
out, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, like I don't have to do that.
This is a
I
power
can
chord, yeah.
Yeah, I can just do this thing. And by the way, I've been listening. I don't know why I've glazed over this. AC/DC records too, man. When I was younger, like
Yeah.
one of the first cassettes that one of my friends ever gave me was it was a long play cassette and it had most of 5150 on one side and most of Back in Black on the other side, right?
Wow.
So and then I got into AC/DC. I bought a ton of AC/DC cassettes, uh, and uh, and uh, and again, just being a kid, not knowing that like there were two different singers and all this stuff, didn't even dawn on me, right? It was just AC/DC, and that's what it was. And um, but uh, but yeah, man, like then I could get in the garage band. Like I can play these songs. Like my whole band can play these songs. Like not well, but we can play them. And so that was fun, man. And then I went to college, ill-fated trip to college. Like I think a lot of musicians make that ill-fated one semester.
Yeah.
Pa Parents want you to go. I went. I sat in my room and practiced guitar the whole time. I never went to class. I don't remember going to any classes
No.
and just got out and told my parents like, "Hey, I'm good. I'm out." And I went and got a job as a carpenter and then just started my first real band in earnest at that point and just made all the mistakes, wrote all the bad songs, you know, toured in vans and slept in Walmart parking lots and didn't bathe for weeks and did that whole thing for a long time and that was really kind of the beginning of the journey.
When I'm speaking to a lot of musicians and people in bands, I'm always surprised at the fact that sometimes the parents would stop them wanting to go down that kind of route.
Hmm.
But I suppose being around music from such a young age and your parents being so musical, surely they believed in you a bit more than the standard, we need you to go and get an education, we need you to go out and get a proper job, and that can be a hobby and a bit of fun.
No, man, no.
Really?
They didn't believe. I mean, they believed in me, right? I mean,
Yeah, of course.
your parents are gonna think that, but I mean, look, and rightly so. They thought that it was never gonna happen. I mean, it was like this is gonna be you're gonna end up homeless and you're never gonna amount to anything. And they wouldn't say that like you're never gonna amount to anything, but like that's now me looking back on it, I understand their trepidation about it. I just never, you know what? I never had like well, hang on. Let me backtrack a little bit. This is
Of
going to seem a
course.
little weird if you've never had anything like this happen. When I was 12 years old, I stood in front of a mirror with a guitar with no strings on it that I had made in what in the States we have what's called shop class, which is it was like woodworking class. You'd make things, you do crafts and stuff like that. And I made this guitar at 12 years old that had like no strings on it. It was just a block of wood with a fake neck on it. And I um I stood in front of the mirror and I had this moment of like knowing that like I'm not going to do what everybody else does. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a famous musician or anything like that, but like I just knew in that moment it's like I'm going to do something different. And so fast forward to the touring in vans and my parents kind of being having the trepidation about what I was doing, quitting school. Um, I didn't go into it having any sort of knowing like I was going to be successful. It was just about an adventure. It was like I just knew that I didn't want to sit in an office or I didn't want to sit in a classroom because those things were wildly painful for me and still are. So. But yeah, man, they weren't exactly encouraging about it, but they weren't. But once they saw what I was doing, man, I mean, it took them a few years to figure it out that like this is a real thing. It's not just a phase. And I remember the day my dad, he kind of got it. The first day my dad ever got it, or the first time he ever talked to me about it, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing wasting your time here in Charleston, South Carolina? Shouldn't you be in Los Angeles or, New York or at the time Atlanta was a big thing. Bands like Seven Dust were coming out and that kind of thing." So, he started to encourage me a lot, and that was good, but not at first.
Was there a moment that you remember was the turning point that you kind of had enough to say to them, look, this is real? Was it a certain band or a certain show that was enough to convince them that you'd made the right decision?
No, it was it took me quitting actually to arrive at that place. And what I mean is I had exhausted myself in several different bands trying to break into the industry But in that process, I'd started to have success as a producer and as a songwriter with not only with my own band stuff, but with other bands. And I wanted to ask my now wife to marry me, and I was a construction worker that played music every weekend. That's all I did. And so I was like, I'm going to give this recording studio thing a go. And I think when I did that, um, that's when I could look at my parents honestly and go like, look, I can make a living doing, maybe it's not what I originally wanted to do, but this is something else that I'm extremely passionate about. And, uh, and so that moment of, I had to look at myself and go, hey man, I had to it's maybe the first adult decision I ever made, which was, look, if you want to be married and you want to provide and, this isn't doing it right now. And so, but I know I can't sit in an office and I got to do something with music. And, I was really starting to, you know, uh, impress some people and that kind of thing with the production I was doing. So, when I made that decision, kind of the first adult decision I ever made, I think that my parents watching me make that decision, I think was probably the thing where they were like, "Oh, okay, he's going to be okay."
That's good. And I think having the studio and this is why I find it quite difficult when I talk to people that produce albums and obviously perform as well and write
Mhm.
and be in a band. And I always wonder with Shinedown how it is to be the producer of your own work with those like-minded musicians and friends and family and be able to stay like take a step back
Hmm.
and observe and hear what's right for the songs with it meaning so much to you personally. I don't think I could ever do it myself. I think it must be really hard to switch on and off from the producer to the performer to the writer to the friend to the family member to the rest of the band. It must be really difficult.
It can be. All I've ever done is just follow the sounds in my head. I mean, and that sounds really simple, and it's not simple, and it's not easy.
No.
But I kind of have an intuition about songs, and I have an intuition about what's right and wrong. Sorry, there's no right, just good and bad.
Yeah.
I maybe have an intuition about good and bad. There is no right or wrong in music. I always say there's just good and bad. But uh, uh, sometimes though, I need guidance. I need help. It's not. And it's also knowing that too, knowing when you need help. Like unfortunately he's passed now, but Doug McKean, who was a great friend of mine and helped did a lot of the engineering on the last two Shinedown records with me in here. I really had him with me more to produce the producer in a way. And Doug is just so you're familiar, you are familiar with his work, by the way, but just so you know, he engineered won Grammys for American Idiot, for Black
Wow.
Parade.
Oh, bloody hell.
Um, he did our record Sound of Madness. He did our record called Amaryllis. He's Dave Matthews records, Talking Heads records. Just and a really great guy to have around, just a fun time. And he unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago, I think, at this point. But um, I do need that occasionally, and so it's sometimes one of the hardest things when you're successful is to not develop this hubris and not think that you have it all figured out, because this thing is a constant, this space is a constant learning process. And so while I do have that intuition, I do feel that I know what a song needs. Man, there are times when I have to look at my bandmates, and I'm just like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you
Yeah.
think it needs to be? And but again, it's just making sure that you don't get cocky. If you get cocky, that's when things start to go wrong. When you get to a point where you think you've got it figured out, like we don't need to write. In Shinedown, like we always have this thing where we'll write and write and write and write and write, and then pick this certain group of songs. We've got more songs that have never made it on records than songs that have, and the minute we get to a point where, and by the way, we've had moments in our band where it's like, oh, we got this, man. Like, let's just write. We know what we're doing. We'll just write this many songs, and then you listen to that many. We'll just write 15 songs and we'll pick 12 and put them on a record. And you listen to those 15, and you're like, man, this isn't up to our standard, right? It's like, we need to keep writing. And so uh keeping yourself in check like that and knowing that like that you're never so good that you can bypass your process, whatever that process is. Uh, I like to say in here, and I had this conversation with Brent before we started this record. I'm going to do this differently this time, and I want to try this differently, and we got in here and we started doing things differently, only to realize that you know it wasn't working.
Yeah.
Trying to change up the process wasn't really helping things at all. So
If it's
um,
not broken either, like why change it if it's done so well and
yeah,
it's
as long as
lasted?
it doesn't become formulaic, right?
Of
I don't ever
course,
want to
yeah.
I don't ever want to be in a formula. And we're not in that way. We're always trying different things musically. We're always trying different things in here. But I mean, the process, the act of doing the what's a better way of putting it? The view of the process from 5,000 feet, it should be the same,
Yeah.
because that's your process and that's what works for you. So just being cognizant of those things, man, is really what keeps me out of trouble. I do get into a lot of I mean, man, I pull my hair out. I have a lot of the process of me making records, especially my own records, is not pretty. It's maddening. I beat myself up an awful lot. It's a lot of ups and downs, emotional ups and downs, and mental ups and downs. I and I have to believe that it's like that for just about everybody who really cares about what they're doing. Sometimes I'll watch YouTube videos with producers or with musicians and mixers, and they just, they make it look like it was just this easy thing. Like when I mixed this song, and I just put it on, and I just turned the faders up, and it's just there, and it's like bullshit. It was not just there. That's not what happened.
No.
I've been doing this long enough to know, like, those types of videos, while they're informative and you can learn things from people, like don't ever let them make you feel like it was easy, or like that it's always easy. So anyway, I'm rambling, man. I
No, no, it's
apologize.
interesting. I love it, and I like how honest you are. Because, like you said, some people polish it and make it look like it's so easy and everything just falls into place, and that isn't how it happens. And
Mm-mm.
I wondered, obviously, at the moment, we're not far from a solo album from yourself, and I
Yes.
wondered why it was at this stage you felt that need to then go, and I'm sure you're going to get this question a lot, but what it was
Mhm.
at this point that made you think, actually, I've got songs and I've got ideas that won't fall into the kind of Shinedown family, and I need to take them away and do my thing.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that this record that I'm about to release is already a few years old, believe it or not. It's not something that I just did. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to release it, and that's why it never got released. Um, but I actually started formulating it when we were touring for Attention Attention. So this is 2 records ago, and I had I had a story. The record started with a graphic novel story that goes along with the
Yeah,
record.
I've been reading about
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I'd formulated this story. I had these characters. At some point, I started dabbling with some music, and I went to Brent at the time, and I was like, "Hey, are you ready to start writing another Shinedown record?" Because in our band, anytime we have anything creative to do, we don't take those creative things. It's kind of a pact that we have. We don't take these creative ideas outside of the band unless we've kind of checked in with everybody. It's like, hey, because we always want our best to go into what we do as a band.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, hey, are you ready to start writing a Shine record? Because I've got these ideas. They're a little weird. They're a little outside of what we maybe would normally do, but I think they're cool. And he's like, I'm absolutely not ready to start writing a record. And I was like, well, I'm going to take this stuff and do something with it. And it's like, great, do it. Um, so I started working on the record, my record. Toward the end of the Attention Attention album cycle, and then we had COVID, and I finished. I actually finished the last mix for my solo record 2 days before Brent and I started writing what would become the Planet Zero record. So I've been sitting
Wow.
on this for a minute. It's kind of sandwiched right between Attention Attention and Planet Zero, the making of it, and um, I just never had a time to do it. It was never right. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to release it or not. It's interesting when you know, uh, just self-doubt, things like that,
Of
that creep
course,
in,
yeah.
and it's a little bit different. The record's a bit different. It's a kind of a rock opera. It kind of dabbles in some different genres and does some different things. So I'm super proud of it. But honestly, man, my band and my wife, they were all threatening me with violence if I didn't release it. So, so here we are, man. And I am, man. I am proud of it. I'm very proud of the fact that it exists because it was honestly just something I wanted to see if I could do to play the instruments, to produce, to mix it, to write everything, to write all the lyrics, to sing everything, and uh, and it happened, So
Plus,
that makes me
the
happy.
listeners out there might not know this, but you absolutely, it's all you. So when they say it's a solo record, every song, every
Yeah.
instrument, every bit of production, everything is you.
Yeah, for sure. And I say that the only asterisk that I put beside that is I say that I performed the drums rather than played the drums because I played drums in marching band in high school, right? So
Yeah.
I was such a great trombone player that they put me in marching band. They made me play drums. Uh, but uh, I set the drums up with the kick drum on a stand and then a snare and tom and a tom, and I played with my hands like this, pa, 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 like did the drums like this, and then went back and overdubbed cymbals, and just kind of would take it a section at a time. I wanted to perform everything. Um, there's something that happens when you can do this on a keyboard and get drums out. I mean, we all, that's how I do demos. This is what happens. But there's something extra that happens, when a human being is moving, is doing the thing, and when microphones are picking up air that's moving. Like for me, there's always this difference between those things, and so I wanted to put that into the music I was making. So it took me a week and a half to record the drums, but I didn't sit down in the drum kit and play it the way you think that like a drummer would play. So I never say I don't want to. I would hate to offend drummers by saying I played drums on the record. I performed the drums on the record, but everything I did everything on the record. Like and that's my only caveat is the drums, because I don't want people to think I sat down in a drum kit and like bashed it out like you normally see people do it. And I'll be putting up some video of me recording the drums. I recorded the whole thing. I filmed it because it is interesting, to kind of watch somebody
No,
just bash
definitely.
on
I
drums
love
with
all
their
those
with their
back,
with their hands rather than using their feet too much. But um, and I've done that since too, man. I've recorded some other stuff like where you know I'll just put the drums up on a stand. I'll just play them all with my hands and then go back and you have to overdub cymbals that way, right? You can't, I don't have enough
no.
hands to play cymbals and drums at the same time, but I enjoy that process, man. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's everything, man. And I wanted to know for myself. It was like, I wonder if I can just like really make a whole record this actually that I think is good. Whether or not that's the mark of something, like when you're making something for the right reasons, the only reason you should be making it is for you. You should make it for you so you can feel good about it, so you believe in it. And if other people like it after that, that's kind of a bonus. So, but that also contributes to the trepidation about putting it out. It's like I think this thing's great. I think it's fun. I think it's awesome. But what are other people going to think? And um,
Is that
you know,
scary?
yeah, yeah, it is, man. For me, it is. Uh, I'm I've got a little bit of I've got the neurodivergent package, right? I've got the autism, ADD, ADHD, and executive dysfunction. But one of the things that comes along with that is this thing called rejection sensitive rejection sensitive dysphoria, or I think that's what it's called, rejection sensitive dysphoria. I don't like it takes a lot for me to put myself out there,
Of
basically,
course, yeah.
and and I think everybody has some form of rejection sensitivity, right? But it's like it's a very amplified place for me. So, um,
You're
I
putting
have a
yourself
tendency
under a
to,
lot of pressure with the release of it all being you. It's not like you can share the
yeah.
responsibility of the
Well,
reviews. It's like this is
well,
all me.
that's the thing, man. When I'm used to making records with my friends, and or if I'm writing with my friends, and I can look around a room and say, we all agree this is good, right? And then it's like, well, we're all on the hook for this at this point. If it's not good, it's on us. Well, when you're doing a solo record, if it's not good, it's just on one person. So, you know,
What
it
happens
does
if
make.
people absolutely adore it and say, we want to see this stuff live?
I've
We
thought
haven't.
about that. I think honestly, I've thought about that. I've thought about what happens if I ever do play this live, and I'll probably just put together a bunch of my friends, like kind of an all-star band of people that
That would be
musicians
awesome.
that people would know from other bands, and I've talked to a couple of them about it, and just like, hey, would you be interested in doing this? So, and it's like I say, it's all people everyone would know, so that would make it fun, to get out and play that and do it live. Um, so, and originally I had zero plans to do that. Like it wasn't even something I was interested in, and now the more that I think about it and talk about it, it's like, man, maybe I should, So,
I think it'd be exciting. Yeah, just
yeah,
get your friends and just go on. Go play some
yeah,
shows and not worry about the numbers and the stats and how many people. So just
yeah,
have fun.
right. Yeah, that's the whole point. I mean, and just play some smaller rooms and just have a good time. That actually would be a lot of fun.
And then while this is going on, for the listeners out there, they'll know that you're in the studio and you're literally in between this podcast, laying down tracks and then
Yep.
doing more work on the brand new Shinedown album, which I know people are going to be very excited about.
Yeah, I was just laying down some guitar right before we started, and Brent will be showing up here in about 15 minutes
Wow.
to record some vocals and actually for a brand new song that we just wrote. Um, we uh, we literally just, I mean, the song is completely fresh. It's not one that we had prepared for the studio. It was just kind of something that came about in the studio. So that makes it even more exciting. I love it when things like that happen. Kind of had this guitar riff and Barry went in and laid down some drums and we're kind of building this thing in real time. But it's a cool song. I'm liking it. So I'm excited about getting it tracked.
What I do on the podcast, and obviously I'm aware of time, and what I love to do with every guest that comes on is, as the episode is all edited and ready for the world to listen to, there's a
Hmm.
piece of music that plays at the very end of the episode. But what I do to try and keep it as original as I can is I ask the guest to choose a song that means a lot to them. Now, that
Hmm.
doesn't need to be a song of your own or Shinedown. I'm looking for a song that, when I ask the question, kind of comes to your heart above any other song. It might be because of a memory or something to do with your childhood or whatever it is. But is there a song that, when I ask the question, and I know it's hard because there's thousands of songs and we've talked today
Yeah.
about a number of bands, but after today's episode is ready for the world to listen to, what's that song you'd love to be played at the end of today's episode?
God Only Knows by the Beach Boys.
Ah, that's such a great song.
Brian Wilson, man.
Yeah.
Like, and I didn't know this either, but Carl Wilson's the one that sang that on the recording. I never knew that. His brother sang it. And for me, man, it's just like that anytime somebody asks me, what do you, and it's not like I sat down one day and calculated out what I think is the best song ever written. Uh, but for some reason, anytime somebody asks me, that's what comes to my mind all the time. And it's such a unique piece where it's so I use this word tangible a lot as you've heard, but it's so tangible for the average listener to love and appreciate. But for the musician, the technical aspect of that song is astonishing, and it's just a masterclass in A, taking chances, B, crafting an arrangement that on paper would seem like it's going to, no one's ever going to get it or like it. And then when you hear it, it's just the most natural sounding thing. I mean, the key changes that take place, the first chorus of the song is in a completely different key than the last chorus. And again, the average listener doesn't care about things like that. They just want to feel an emotion. And so the fact that all of those things get woven together and then just the lyrical content and how you know, I think it rings true for a lot of artists because of their significant other, the things that have to be well, look, man, I know the things I put my wife through just because I'm sort of a basket case mentally and emotionally most of the time. Uh, and I where would I be without her?
Yeah.
I would be homeless and broke probably and everything else. So to me, man, it's just
It's a
one
perfect
of the
song.
greatest songs ever
Yeah.
written. Yeah, it really is.
And the
So
whole album, like Pet Sounds, the whole album is just unbelievable, untouchable.
it is, and again, just uh, a master class um, in how to yeah, again, I think I said it before, just weaving in technicalities that when you're trying to explain them to someone or you're trying to put them down, uh, you know, they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand it. You just have to get it done and then play it back. If I saw someone the other day breaking down the harmonies on Good Vibrations, and the nuances of the bass parts and the middle part and the melody and if you listen to the bass harmony on Good Vibrations, it doesn't even sound like it belongs in the same song. It's like it's just what, like if you just hear that harmony by itself, it jumps all over the place and it doesn't make any sense. And then it only makes sense and when you finally put that melody on top of it, and then it's like, oh man, all this makes sense. And so it's that whole record is a just to maybe bring this full circle, not comparing myself to Brian Wilson in a genius level
Of
or anything like
course.
that, but the courage that it takes to do something different, and this is for all creators. This is not talking about myself. You have to have the courage to create something that is for you, and just jump off the cliff and know that it's good. And if you think it's great, because that record wouldn't exist if Brian Wilson hadn't had that courage to just create what he heard in his head, no matter what. So,
You know,
I mean,
I'm good.
if he listened to the people around him, I mean, how many people told him that record was like? Because I mean, we've all seen documentaries and we've also seen feature films about the making of that record and how the people around him just didn't get it. A lot of them, and he's just having to convince them, no, just trust me. This is going
Now
to
he's
be
like,
great.
look, you should have listened to me.
You should have listened to me. You know.
Now I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to end this interview knowing that you're going to be doing more recording, and I'm going to stick that album on because I just have to listen to it now. We've talked about it
Yeah.
so heavily.
Yeah, I should listen. Man, another one, and this is cliche probably at this point, but Dark Side of the Moon is another one of those for me, man,
Yeah,
where
it's just
where it's just like it's there's something mystical in that record that it's like a warm bowl of soup or a blanket or something, it's just like from the opening line of Breathe, it's like, or the opening guitar sweep, when it comes in. Uh it just feels like safe. There's just something about
yeah.
that
There's
record,
a
man.
warmth
You
that you
know?
can't
Yeah.
replicate. It's
Yep.
amazing.
For sure.
Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I feel like we've only scraped the surface. I'm like, I think we should do more another time. Like we've done less than
We
an
should.
hour, but I feel like there's so much more to talk about. So
Yeah, I'd love to. Just let me know anytime you want, man. Maybe when the Shinedown record comes out or
well,
something, we
yeah,
can
of
do we can
course.
do
And
it.
I've had, people like Alex Winter and Neil Blomkamp and people have been on 3 or 4 times. So it's,
Yeah,
the door's always open. And maybe we come on and, yeah, let's do something on the release and talk about it. And hopefully you might be even in the UK so we can do something face to face.
that'll be great. Would love it.
Thank you. I'll let you get back,
Okay,
get ready to record. But I really appreciate your time tonight.
perfect. Thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It's great talk. Had fun.
So there's my interview with me and Eric. What a great guy. One of my favourite interviews I've done in a while. Really chilled, so good to talk to, and I loved his voice. When I was editing it back and listening, I was really listening to his tone and just how natural he is. Brilliant guest, so chuffed with it, and I can't wait for everyone to now go and check out his brand new album, which is called I Had a Name. Go and listen, and if you love it, let me know on any of my socials, and I'll obviously share the news with Eric because he'll really appreciate all the good feedback. Go on his socials, give him a follow, and obviously I know a lot of people will be listening today because you're fans of Shinedown. How exciting, as I did the interview with Eric, he's in the studio already laying tracks for their brand new album. Oh, it's going to be epic. I can't wait to see them at Download in the summer, and I can't wait to hopefully get Eric back on the podcast to talk more about Shinedown in the near future. Now, before I go, on every episode of Mark and Me, I can't stress this enough. The way I'm successful, the way that I get the name out there, is for you guys at home just to take a couple of minutes to share the episodes. Most of you have Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, and all I ask is when you see the post that has the picture of Eric and the band, just hit that share button, or like, or just the little heart button. All those things help the algorithms get more people seeing it, and before you know it, there's so many fans out there that will love Eric's work, love Shinedown, will see the picture and suddenly go and listen to the episode, they subscribe, and before you know it, you've got a fan for life. And that's all just because you took literally 10 seconds to share the episode, so please keep on doing that. If you love the podcast and want to support me that little bit more, I do have a Patreon. If you go onto markandme.com, there's a link on there. You can literally sign up for as little as £2 a month. For that, you're guaranteed at least an episode a week, usually 2. You get a welcome pack with some stickers. You also get an exclusive pin badge, which no one else can get, only people on Patreon. You get newsletters, and I do keep saying it, but it is going to happen. You're going to get exclusive episodes called The Lost Tapes, which are only for people that subscribe and come through on Patreon, and that's my way of saying thank you for supporting Mark and Me. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to the 2 sponsors of Mark and Me. First off, Vice Press. If you're in the market for incredible posters, prints, awesome merchandise, head over to vicepress.com. Whatever you choose to buy, when it gets to the checkout, add in the discount code MarkandMe10. That gets you 10% off that order, will make a huge difference, and those guys are the best out there. All the stuff on their site is licensed, they support the best artists in the world, and trust me, you will want to buy something as soon as you go on their site. And not only that, the second sponsor of the podcast, Richer Sounds, they always need a shout out because they're the best out there. If you want to buy yourself anything to do with audio and visual, a TV, a projector, some Sonos, some headphones, go on richersounds.com or visit any of their high street stores. They're the best out there, they won't be beaten on price, and they've supported Mark and Me for years, so thank you so much to those guys. Right, the last thing to do now is just to say thanks again for taking the time to listen to today. Go and check out Eric's work, let me know what you think, and I'll be back in only a few days' time with another brand new episode of Mark and Me.
Love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. If you should ever leave me, though life will still go on, believe me, the world could show nothing to me. So what good would